Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I would like to thank all of you for joining us today for our Conversations with Cal webinar featuring Dr. Chamara, Kwakye, and Abigail Tykocki and the making of Corktown, an MSU theater production. My name is Denver Williams, and I will be moderating today's discussion. I'm an intern with the College of Arts and Letters Advancement team, and I'm a journalism major, and I'm also minoring in public relations. Before we begin the discussion, for those of you that are new to Zoom, I would like to direct you to the question and answer button at the bottom of the screen. You may use the Q&A button to submit any questions you have at any point of the webinar. We will keep track of your questions and be sure to address them to our speakers here today after their presentation. I would also like to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel within the next few days for those who could not make it today, or if you would like to watch it back at your leisure. The only faces that will be shown today and on the recorded version are those of the presenter, so you do not have to worry about your camera or your microphone. I would now like to introduce our speakers today, scholar, writer, and performer, Dr. Chamara Kwakye, and the director of Corktown and an academic specialist in the Department of African American and African Studies at Michigan State University. Abby Tykocki is the production manager of Corktown and is the teaching faculty for the arts, cultural management, and museum studies program, and a communications specialist for the College of Arts and Letters. Without further ado, I will now hand it over to Chamara and Abby to discuss their upcoming production.
Thank you, Denver, so much. Hey, everybody.
Thank you, Denver.
Good afternoon. Hopefully y'all are somewhere where there's warm weather. If not, we're sending you some sunshine from East Lansing. So excited that it's warm outside.
Oh, and I already see greetings from Spartan Nation North Texas branch. I just flew back from Houston yesterday, so yay, Texas.
Yay. All right, where should we start?
So Chamara, we had to talk about starting with sort of how we came to be producing Corktown or Through the Valley of Dry Bones for the Department of Theater. So I'm going to speak a little bit to that and our season as a whole, and then hand it over to Chamara to tell us about the work that has gone into the production and the impact that it's making for our students, and then hopefully the impact it's going to have for our audiences as well. So I'll share my screen for just a quick minute to talk a bit about our season. Can everyone see my screen? It says that you can. So this is our 2022-23 season for the Department of Theater. And at the top, you'll see that we are focusing on community as our theme for the season. So planning for this season began in fall of last year when the season selection committee for the department started meeting. And that committee is made up of our department chair, faculty members from the studies and management area, from the design area, from the acting area, and then also 2 representatives from our MFA acting cohort, acting and design cohorts, and also undergraduate representatives. Last year we had 3 undergraduate representatives from stage management and from acting and design. So it was a really wonderful group, and we start by just sending out a form and saying, submit, what shows do you want to see us doing next year? And that goes out to everybody, anybody could submit, but usually students and faculty in the department do most of the submissions. So we picked the theme of community because it's been a rocky couple of years for everybody. And we wanted to see what scripts we could bring forward that would help us explore all of the challenges that come with being a community and how we can champion traditions that bind us together and as neighbors that make us stronger together, which is something that's really important to the Michigan State University campus community, as well as all communities. And this is the season we ended up with. So we have Corktown, which we'll get into. For the Love Of is about a roller derby team. MSU Unscripted is our first year students and transfer students learn the art of improvisational comedy, and they perform. In the spring, we have Charlotte's Web, which is a wonderful adaptation of the children's classic. And we have Sweat, which is a Pulitzer Prize winning play by Lynn Nottage, and Bright Star, which is a musical written by Steve Martin, the comedian, and Edie Brickell, the musician, which is really wonderful, all of which explore different aspects of community. But for anybody who isn't familiar or fully familiar with all these scripts, these three shows, Corktown, For the Love Of, and Sweat, all call for dramatically more racially and ethnically diverse casts than you'd typically see in a Department of Theater show. And that was something that we discussed at great length during the season selection process. I'll stop sharing now because I think that's all you're going to get out of looking at our graphics. But it was a risk we decided to take in the name of, DEI, which is sounding more and more like, oh, DEI, DEI, DEI. But we have a lot of discussions as a department about how to move things forward. And it's hard because our faculty is predominantly white, and our student demographic for our department is predominantly white. And there was a lot of concern that we don't have the diversity, racial and ethnic diversity within our casting pool of the students who are enrolled in our department to produce shows like this. And so it feels like a catch-22 sometimes of we can't do these shows because we don't have the casting pool. But if we don't do these shows, we're missing out on telling these incredible stories and bringing these to life on the stage. And how do we diversify what we're offering as a department and engage with a more diverse student body if all we're showing to them is that we're doing the same thing that's always been done? So it's a tough question, and it's something that we struggled with and ultimately decided it was worth the risk, knowing full well that we were going to probably run into issues along the way, not having any idea what those issues would be, and hoping that they were things that we'd be able to work through as we encountered them. And I think so far that's proven to be very true. One of the things that immediately came through from the students, particularly students of color after we announced the season, was cool that we're doing these shows, but now we feel like we're going to be cast in these shows, but we don't know if it's because we had a talent, because of our talent, because we gave an amazing audition, or just because of the color of our skin. And isn't that a form of, shoot, my brain is blanking right now. Chamara, help me out here. Is a form of tokenization. That's what I'm going for. And we heard that. And we also said, we don't do the best job of letting everybody know this across campus, but any student enrolled at MSU is eligible to audition for our shows. And our hope was to be able to reach out to the MSU is an incredibly diverse campus, still predominantly white, but there are students from all over the world coming to MSU. So there's a possibility there. So we went for it. And also we told our students, all of you are very talented, otherwise you wouldn't be here. And we're bringing these stories forward as like something for you to grab onto that maybe you identify with more than anybody identifies with some of the usual things that you see come across stages in classic theater and American theater. And now I feel like I'm getting a little rambly, so I'm going to kind of stop there. And except to say, we also said for Corktown, this is such an incredible story. And we don't think we have a director on faculty that is going to be able to deliver what's needed for the student experience in performing the show. And so we said, we're going to need a guest director. And luckily, usually we bring in guest directors from all over the country. And this time we were lucky enough to just like look across the, kind of across the hallway in the College of Arts and Letters to the AAAS department and find Chamara, Kwakye, who has this incredible background in performance art. And it just sort of seemed like the stars aligned. I'm sure there was a lot more red tape and stuff behind her hiring that I don't even know about. But she's been a true gift to the department, and we're so lucky to have her on board for this show. So at this point, I'll mute myself and let Chamara take over.
Hey y'all. Yes, I'm so excited to tell the story of Corktown with the Department of Theater students from around campus, honestly, um, auditioned to be in the play. And I'll give a little kind of do a couple things. One, tell how I even was approached to be a part of Corktown, and then to tell my vision of how I wanted to tell the story. And then three, what we've kind of learned and hope audiences take away. So initially last year, the Department of Theater did a production called Hit the Wall. And Ike Holter is the playwright. And there was a call out from the director to see if anybody was interested in serving it and filling in kind of some of the gaps. If you're not familiar with Hit the Wall, it's a retelling of the Stonewall Rebellion in New York. And the director asked for folks who were interested in Black queer theory or Black performance studies to kind of come in and talk to the cast and maybe fill in some of the blanks that the cast might have about that historical time period, about Black LGBTQIA identifying people. And so I volunteered. And fast forward, the production is happening. It was opening night, and I was invited to dinner with the playwright and some other folks from the Department of Theater, some other guest artists who had come in. And we were all just kind of talking about the process of doing creative work. And I was saying, like, the best storytellers know how to tell stories from different angles. So I have experience as a performer, experience directing, did a short in undergrad, which I hope nobody ever finds in film, but, you know, like, can wear multiple hats. And even if you don't do it well, have tried to tell the story from multiple angles. And Stephen DeBenedetto, the chair of theater, was like, what are you doing next fall? And I was like, teaching, advising, all the things. He was like, how do you feel about guest directing? We're doing Corktown. Have you ever heard of Corktown? And what I didn't say was like, oh my gosh, yes, immediately. I was like, yeah, I've heard of Corktown, and was super excited because I'm a fan of just Jeff Augustin's work. And I said yes. And so fast forward, I was guest directing. So in terms of my vision for the project, for those that don't know, and I don't want to give too much away about Corktown, but it's a story told by Jack Hay. He's a 14-year-old, when we meet him, he's a 14-year-old queer Black boy, and he's giving tours of his city that is on, I would say, probably not ground zero. I'm a big fan, and one of the inspirations for this, for how we're telling the story, is Peter Moskowitz's How to Kill a City. And Peter Moskowitz is a journalist, and he has covered gentrification in multiple cities. So How to Kill a City is the story of 4 cities. So New Orleans, New York, goodness, I have the book right here in front of me. New Orleans, New York, Detroit, and San Francisco, right? And so he tells the story of how all 4 of those cities become the way that they are now, like rapidly, how they've gentrified. Some are slower in terms of how the gentrification happens. And so when we meet Jack Hay, I would say not in ground zero, but right after ground zero. So what he calls like the start of. And so we know that Corktown takes place. Corktown is a hearkening to a neighborhood in Detroit, but some of the things in the play are not exactly Detroit. So it feels like it could be anywhere, and that's purposeful. But a lot of the things are true about what happens in the story, what happens to the city of Detroit. And so we meet this little boy, and he's giving tours of his city. And so we get to meet some of the people, we get to meet his family. We get to go, we are guests on the tour, and we get to see how he sees the city and what's happening to his city. And so I knew that I wanted to tell a story that was centering family, like what happens to family. So to really tell the story from, we often hear about gentrification from a macro, like a larger perspective, but we don't hear about it from the people on the ground. And I wanted it to center his voice, the people in his neighborhood, his family, and the people that he loves. So it was important for me to show how everybody kind of responds to what's happening in their city. And so we get to see it from different vantage points, but Jack Hay is our tour guide. And so we began to trust him. We watch him grow, and we see kind of what it does to him internally and what it does to the city externally. And I remember saying in the early production meetings with the design team that I'm interested in telling stories about the choices that people make when they often don't have a choice, if that makes sense. And I think this story falls right in line with that. We get to see what negotiations people are making. For the cast, what we've learned, I won't speak for all of the cast, but I think it's been a learning process, right? We come back, we started rehearsals right after Labor Day. And, building something from the ground up is always interesting to watch. Watching the students grow and develop their ideas on gentrification, their thoughts about how this would play out in real life, and what are their characters' backstories? What are they bringing to this? And it's fascinating to hear, and I don't want to give too much away. I'm really, really trying out not to give too much away so that folks will be, surprised when they see it. But, we have police officers in the play, and hearing students' backstories. And one student in particular tells his backstory was about his character playing a police officer in a gentrifying neighborhood, is that sometimes he really feels alone in the city and he doesn't know what to do. Hearing the backstory of a character, her name is Corner Prophet, and hearing the students say, like, she's seen some things in her life. And Corner Prophet, we're supposed to assume, may not necessarily have a home, but saying that she's seen some things in her life, she's witnessed some things in her life, both good and bad, and she wants to have the space to tell the stories. Jack Hay figuring out who he is, he's missing school to give these tours. So figuring out who he is, not having a lot of other queer people in his neighborhood or queer people that are out in his neighborhood. So figuring out, discovering his sexuality and having to tell his family. So we see a lot of things from a lot of different people. Someone who is Clark, the character Clark, who's coming in to help to open this community gallery, but is he helping or is he hurting? How does that factor into how the neighborhood changes and who can stay there and who can't? So I'm excited about what we've worked on, what we've done, seeing it go from, words on the page to people embodying these characters. And then we are going into the space tomorrow to finally see all of the design, all of the elements, and bringing that all together is important. Personally, and I'll say this, and then we can kind of talk more freely. Personally, this story was also personal for me to tell. I am from Los Angeles, born and raised, and I'm from South LA in particular, so Crenshaw and 48th. And in the last few years, I've been away from home for a while now. I moved from Atlanta. I went to graduate school in Illinois, went back home for a year, and then moved to Kentucky, and then from there moved to Atlanta. So, and now here. And each time I go home, my neighborhood looks completely different. There are fewer and fewer people who look like me. And I was looking, I follow real estate all around the country because I'm fascinated by it. And I saw a house on the street that I grew up on come up for sale. And that house is $1.5 million. And I was like, oh, I will never be able to live in my neighborhood ever again. Unless I hit the lottery or choose a completely different profession. And I don't feel like I do too bad, but I, am not in a position to buy a $1.5 million home. And watching as families start to disappear from my street that I've known my entire life. So it was personal to me to tell this story. I also, I really, really love Jeff's point of view. He is Haitian American, and so him bringing in part of this feels like Haitian folklore, and so wanting to do justice to that. There's some nods to Haitian culture in our design, and that's purposeful. And just kind of the community organizing background also that I come from shows up there. So I wanted to do justice to this story and on all different levels. And I am so excited to see it come together and to have you all see it, hopefully, if you're in the area, to see it soon. So, yes. Hey, Abby.
Hi. Can I add a couple of things? Like, I talk and then I go, oh, I forgot to say this and I forgot to say that.
Yes.
I sort of glossed over how we went from calling for shows about community to like actually picking the show. So I wanted to acknowledge that it was submitted, I believe, by our head of acting and directing, Rob Rosnowski. And he had submitted that and Our Town and as sort of a package deal, because although I believe that Jeff Augustin sort of modeled what construct of the show around Our Town, in that there's a narrator, that there's a graveyard and that sort of stuff. So there's an Our Town vibe to it, but I also have to say, like when I first read Corktown, I didn't think about Our Town at all. Like it completely stands on its own. And for that reason, one of the reasons that I was like, I think we should just do Corktown on its own, not as a parallel, with a brother show, a sister show, or whatever, of Our Town to compare and contrast. So that was sort of how Corktown came to be, and everybody on the committee, I don't remember anybody having any opposition to producing Corktown other than the casting issues that I mentioned. And the other thing about the script that spoke to me, I think he does a brilliant job of addressing the impacts of the white savior trying to rush in and help and fix things without taking into account the community and the culture and the help that's actually being asked for or that is actually needed. And I feel like I'm sitting in that right now as a department, as someone who's on the season selection committee, as someone who received feedback from students saying, we're not so sure about this, and we decided to go forward with the show anyway. Are we helping? I don't know. I don't know. And so that's something that I grapple with, and that speaks to me through the script and then through the work we're actually doing here in this department as well.
I also wanted to think about like why is it important for audiences to see this show? This is such very telling about the contemporary moment. We are inflation is high, the cost of living is high, and people are trying to figure out how they're going to make it, how they're going to live. And so in Corktown, we get to figure out how do we live through these like really precarious times. How do we balance joy? How do we balance anguish? How do we balance laughter? And really figuring out like what is the meaning of home, especially since that becomes, in moments like this, in financial crisis that we're in, whether people are talking about it or not, on the news, this is the time that we're in. And so I really think it's a universal story that anyone can relate to. I had a student ask me like, well, how do you, for people who have never experienced gentrification, I was like, we all have, we're living on stolen land. So this is not a story, nobody gets kind of an easy out in this conversation. I really want people to take away from the show to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. I'm hoping that they'll be comfortable asking questions. Gentrification is not something that's inevitable. It's something that it's by design of capitalism. All of these things are interconnected. And so I want us to think about, like, when we see something new, new restaurants, coffee shops, all of the pretty things that we're supposed to be attracted to, who was displaced in order to make those things happen? Who doesn't get to be here anymore for this new stuff to be here? And this is not saying that all this stuff can't exist, right? But why do people have to be pushed out for these things to exist? And do we want more things that we can consume, or do we want to be able to live with each other and have community with each other? And then lastly, like, why it's a compelling story. I can't think of a single show that centers the voice of a Black queer young person as our narrator, as our storyteller. And so for me, Kwakye is like whip smart. He is a smart butt. He is, he's trained his eye to see beauty where other people have long forgotten, or who see, things that are ugly, who don't peer beyond kind of surface level. And so for him to be, he's precocious, but for him to be that young, for him to be a Black queer working class boy, like these are the narratives that we don't often get to center. And so I'm so thankful that the Department of Theater decided to do Corktown, because we don't often get to hear from Black queer young people. And so it made me proud to be Black and queer, not young, but to be Black and queer, and to have a storyteller that I think that if I had seen Kwakye as a kid, like what stories do I feel like I would have had the power to tell, or the things that I would have had the power to do in my community, for my community. So I'm hoping that people will be entertained, that they'll laugh, and then they'll go away with some really profound questions of themselves and of the people that they live with.
Oh, you're muted, Denver.
My apologies. I have a question for Chamara. The first question is, do you have any plans to direct more plays after this? Would you like to?
Immediately after Corktown, the rap finishes, I am performing with my Black Feminisms class, AAAS. I'm currently teaching AAAS 200, which is Black Feminisms Past, Present, and Future. So I won't be directing, but I'll be performing, absolutely directing more. I don't know in what capacity or where, but that's what's immediately following. So yes. Thank you, Denver.
Of course. The next question is, can you clarify how many students in this production are non-theater majors? What was it like to work with them?
So I'm trying to count. So even within theater, there are theater students who are theater majors, but not BFA majors. So they're not focused on acting. So we have, I think the cast is probably evenly split between folks that are concentrating on acting and folks who are not. Probably actually more who are not focused, actually, yeah, now that I'm thinking, more that are not concentrating on acting. And so that comes with like a wide array of experiences, like their background experiences. But from outside of the Department of Theater, I think there's 3 people in the cast, and we have an engineer, we have someone who is majoring in nutrition, so and with the goal of becoming a nurse, and I recruited them directly from my class that I was teaching previously, and I can't remember what the other person's major is, but I know it's not theater.
Nice. And my next question is, what are you both looking forward to once Corktown premieres?
Ooh, I don't know. We have a special guest in Corktown, so I'm really excited for audiences to see the special guest. And it's something that I don't think people will be expecting, so I'm looking forward to that. I won't give anything away. I'm looking forward to the cast. Finally, I think everybody, the weather has changed. Folks are coming in, their energy is a little low because, again, like we're human, we're adjusting to the weather change, the season change. And so folks have been a little sick and under the weather. So I'm looking forward to them seeing their hard work pay off. And just, it can be such a grind as you're trying to put together a show that you don't stop to enjoy it. So I'm really looking forward to them having fun. And just having fun with each other. That's probably one of the key things. And hopefully our audience will enjoy it. But I know I want the students in particular to enjoy their hard work.
Yeah, I'll second what Chamara said, and in that there comes a point in every rehearsal process where what the cast needs more than anything is an audience to respond to the amazing work that they're doing. And that also goes, in our department for the students that we have designing the shows, the students we have backstage operating the boards, managing the deck. Like I think there are almost 60 students all told involved in this production in some way. And getting all of that work in front of an audience really is just the icing on the cake. And I'm excited for audiences to see what they've put together. I'm excited to see what this has been put together. Chamara's got a better look at it right now than I do. I see the design stuff, but the acting I haven't peeked at yet. So I'm excited to see that. And another thing that I'm excited for is that the first Sunday that we're performing before the show starts. So the show starts at 2 o'clock. At 1:15, we have the MSU Gospel Choir is going to come and perform on stage pre-show for any audiences that are joining us that day. And that was through special arrangement. They're also going to be featured within the sound design that has been built for the show, which was a collaboration between our sound design and engineering faculty, Lucas Nunn, and also Chamara's wife, Lashandra Hemphill. I hope I'm saying Lashandra's name correctly. But that was and our assistant director, who is also in the class as an MFA acting student, Ural Grant, he is in the MSU Gospel Choir. So that's just a small performance is something I'm really excited about because it's such a wonderful example of the collaboration that can happen across the university, and tapping those resources and tapping into people and like what are their interests and things that they do outside of this department and bringing it into the department to enhance the work that we're doing here is really exciting for me.
My next question is, are there any fun stories that you guys would like to share from production?
Oh my goodness. I have, so as recent as last night, I've asked them to pull their 4 favorite lines from the play. And I'll give you 2, and I don't feel like those 2 give anything away. Hold up, creamy goat milk is one. Through the Valley We Go is another one. What's one that I can say that won't give something away? I feel like the other 2 will give something away. We had a Soul Train line during rehearsal once, and so it wasn't necessarily funny, but it was fun. So I think there's probably video, if not pictures of that. There's a scene where someone is sneaking into a window, and during rehearsal, so I was like, just pretend like, because they're supposed to pretend like there's some sort of accident, just pretend like there's an accident, and there actually ended up being an accident. Thankfully, that person is not hurt. But they tripped, and it wasn't on purpose, and like everybody just fell out once we found out that the person was okay. So like those kind of little things that have been fun. And once we got confirmation of our special guest star, everybody was like, oh my gosh, it's gonna happen. So I won't give too much away.
Yeah, come for the special guest star for sure. I think for me, from during the design process which actually started last spring. So we had design meetings all last spring and finished the design process as much as we could before the students broke for summer break. And in those meetings, we had one meeting where we actually met on the Passant stage at the Wharton Center. And it was really exciting to see the designers moving within the space to describe what they were envisioning, and Chamara, riffing off of that and the collaborative nature of the process. I also loved the second week of, the first meeting is Chamara presenting her vision as a director. And the second week is for the students to come back and say, based on what I heard from Chamara, here's the research I've been doing and what's inspiring me in building and crafting this design. And there were so many students that had done like a really good dig into learning about the Corktown neighborhood. So many of our students are not even from Michigan, let alone Detroit, let alone know anything about a specific neighborhood. And seeing in terms of like imagery and research, how they had found similar things and were already collaborating from like an inspirational level was really fun to see. Just really proud of the work that our design students have been doing on this show for sure. In terms of just learning from a dramaturgical standpoint as well. We have dramaturgy students as well, and they bring in all sorts of fantastic information, and the way that they were sponging up all of this new information and trying to incorporate it into design was really fun to watch.
My next question is, what was an unexpected difficulty of putting this together?
I think the biggest difficulty was the process of like opening it up to non-theater students to come and audition. I don't know how many students know that it's, like anyone can audition. And so really trying to make sure that we got the word out and cast the net far and wide for these characters was challenging, because again, like I think MSU is probably one of the places, one of the few places that I've been that is so very siloed. And this is nothing to theater's fault. Like this is very like people have college identities. There's not, I could not tell you what's going on in other colleges at all. I can barely tell you almost what's happening in other departments within the college. And so, I don't think that I anticipated that, but it's again, like no fault of theaters and more so kind of just a larger kind of culture of MSU. But I'm really, really happy that we did reach students from everywhere around campus. One of our lead characters is an engineering major. He's a senior. And I think this will probably be one of his first lead role since he's been here as a student at MSU. And so really, really wasn't expecting it, and really was excited about the folks who were able to come out and try out and audition for the show.
Yeah, completely agree with Chamara that saying we're going to invite all MSU students to audition and then actually getting that information to them is a way bigger thing that I think we didn't do a great job with. We ended up relying on people's individual networks just because we were running out of time, and it's so hard to break out of from a communication standpoint, break out of a department, let alone a college, let alone and getting access to communicating with students from a university level. So that was hard. That was a big challenge, and I'm a believer in that, the right people are going to find their way to a project. And so even if we didn't have this giant pool of people to choose from, people that did come forward and express interest were actually the perfect people to be in these roles. And shoot, there was something else I was going to say, and now it has left my brain. I'll just stop there because I can't remember what I was saying.
I have a message that I can read for you guys. It's from John Howard. He says, "Hello, Chamara and Abigail. You express well the delicate nature of one of several challenges that lie ahead, i.e. cast diversity, without seeming token-like. What then would be an example of a matrix or result that shows success in being achieved, please? By the way, it is exciting to see such courageousness and your openness and creativity to engineer DEI in the theater department productions.
Oh, thank you, John.
Right.
That's a really great question. Shamara, do you have an immediate answer as to what would
I don't. I'm
be achieved?
still reading the
Yeah,
question. What then
this
would be
is
an example of a
this
matrix
is
of-
a hard question, and I don't know that we have necessarily said this is the matrix for what success is. In theater, it's usually success is ticket sales. That's not true in an academic setting. I don't have a good answer. I'll just be honest. I don't have a good answer to that question, but it's a great question that I think our department needs to engage in a discussion around for sure.
Yeah.
So that we can bring forward an answer to that.
Yeah, I think pedagogically, when I think about, so I'm thinking about this for my next class that's performing, what is going to be our measure of success? And we actually talked about it today. We're in the devising portion of creating this piece that we're going to perform for folks. And what I settled on today was that, like, what are our intentions? So having our students name their intentions and having us name our intentions. So in AAAS, we name our intentions of what we want our students to leave with. And for me, one of the measures of success is, are my students leaving this space with their spirit intact, right? So yes, they can have all this pedagogy, they can have all this knowledge, accumulations of facts and data, but are we nurturing them in a way that doesn't destroy them, that builds them, that fortifies them, so that when they leave here, they know that they have gotten something that they can take with them for the rest of their lives and they can apply it to. So that's one. And then two, I also think about displaying and showing their knowledge. Like, so what they've learned and actually applying it. So this is why a theory class is performing, right? So this is a Black feminist theory class, but they're going to perform because they're displaying what they've learned. So publicly sharing that information. I think those would be measures of success. But again, I don't even know that that's perfect. That's something that we have to think about and co-create with our students. What will be an example of success? What would that look like? Because again, it could be ticket sales, right? But what will be meaningful to them beyond the ticket sales? Like, what will be meaningful to the students that we serve? Yeah.
Great answer, Shmir. Yeah, student impact for sure. I also think it's the nature of theater that it sort of exists and then it's gone, right? It's live performance, but it sticks with the people involved in the production long after that. It sticks with audiences hopefully long after that. And sometimes the impact that a production can make reverses over time. But yeah, immediately I agree with Chamara that it's student impact for sure.
Thank you. And before we wrap up, can you let our viewers know when and where they can see the show and how to get tickets?
Woohoo! We open October 14th at the Wharton in the Passant. I think I'm saying it wrong because I've just been told, is it Passant?
Yeah, me, I just learned it too. It's Passant.
Passant, yes, in the Passant. Tickets for students, I believe, are $10. For the general, oh, there we go. Yes. So now let me.
Yes.
That
Student
close
tickets
up.
are $10.
Yes.
General public is $20. Seniors and faculty, MSU faculty are $15. And we're running the 14th through the 23rd. And remember that this October 16th performance is the one where the MSU Gospel Choir will be with us. And you can get tickets right here from the Wharton Center website. So if you just go to the Wharton Center website and type in Corktown, that'll bring you right to this page. You can also call 1-800-Wharton to order through the box office by phone, or you can just go to the Wharton Center box office in person and purchase tickets there as well in advance or right before the show.
Thank you. And with that being said, I would just like to thank you both again for speaking today. I really enjoyed learning about Corktown and the great work you have done. I would also like to thank our attendees for taking time out of their day to watch the presentation. It means a lot to have so many donors and alumni that care about the work being done in the College of Arts and Letters. I hope you all have a great rest of your week and go green.
All right.
So why?
For my students who showed up,